I'm Dawn Ennis. With me again, my BFF, Melody Maia Monet, joining me from Orlando. Hello, Maia.
Hello, Dawn.
We are privileged as journalists to have viewed part 9 in advance of it airing. Now that you've seen it all, we're here to tell you what we saw on repeated views. I've seen it 3 times. Maia, how many times?
I've seen it twice.
Oh my goodness. So let's just do the recap first. We are aboard the Titan. We have the crew all together at the table, and they've decided, you know what? We got to talk to that Jack. And who's going to talk to Jack? Counselor Troi, or as Jack calls her, former Starfleet Counselor Troi. I guess she's retired. They hold hands, and she asks him, would you like me to open that door, the red door we've been seeing through several episodes? And he says, yes, I would. And she goes to open it. And then something that's never happened before happens. She runs away.
Yeah. Yeah.
What did you see? What did you see?
She gets scared. That original cut there makes it seem like it happens instantly, but apparently it took a little while when we get that little flashback scene a little bit later.
Yeah, and she's explaining that, you know, these vines, what do they mean? And he's talking about flowers, and he's talking about things from his childhood. And it doesn't seem so bad until she opens that door.
Right. He's talking about interconnectedness and everybody being one and everything like that. Yeah.
So let's just pause for a second. What was your favorite theory before we found out what was behind the door? What were you thinking?
I was actually thinking Borg by that point. So I wasn't entirely surprised, although I had read a lot of the other, of course, Twitter conspiracy theories as well. And I probably was like 66% Borg, but at the same time, there was a lot of other pretty viable options out there they could have gone with. So while I wasn't surprised, I think if remember, I had shared with you the thing about the vines and what that reminded me of like, you know, when Girardi in the last, in season 2 kind of used those kind of tentacle kind of things to take over the Stargazer. It reminded me of that. So yeah, Borg is where I was leaning, but if it had been something else, like the entity from, you know, Skin of Evil and that kind of
Armus. Yes. Yeah. Who, by the way, was in Lower Decks in a very short scene. No. And I also went way back, a very deep cut, when Troi said in Surrender in the previous episode that it's ancient and weak.
Right.
I found almost those exact words in Wolf in the Fold, a TOS original series show with Scotty, who was, you know, inhabited by Jack the Ripper. Red Jack, but that's so deep a cut, I think people would have protested. And Armus too. Some fan actually said that they saw the vines in season 2 in some of the mother's mental health issues things. I didn't go back and look, so I don't know. Bottom line is, yes, behind the door is the Borg.
Mm-hmm.
I did theorize, and this is based on what a fan said, that Locutus had something to do with it. But my thinking was, well, it's probably a way of reanimating Picard's dead body as a new Locutus using Jack. But then they blew up the Shrike, and that was the end of Picard's body. So much for that theory. Right. So here we are trying to understand, what do we do? What do we do with Jack Crusher? And apparently when Troi says, oh, hold on, don't go talking yet. Sorry, Beverly. Sorry, Admiral. We have protocols. Those protocols don't involve taking away his comm badge or putting him in the brig or locking down the shuttles.
or gassing him asleep before he knows.
Maybe putting him out, putting him in that little ice cube machine that Beverly was in episode 1, part 1. So what does he do? Of course, he breaks out. He takes control of the Starfleet officers, even stops his mother from trying to stop him. And somehow, by the way, they didn't explain it, but I imagine he must have left his counselor's office to go to his own quarters, which are really not really his quarters anyway, but beside the point. So here he is on a shuttle. and he listens to the voices, who he realizes in this episode, even though it's Gates McFadden's voice, it's not really her voice. It's the Queen.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Not the Queen we saw in season 2.
Yeah.
Not the Girardi Queen.
Yeah.
I'm very blessed to have had a conversation with Terry Matalis, and Terry Matalis says that that's the good Borg. That's a separate Girardi Borg, the Borgatti.
Yeah.
They are not the Borg. And you asked a good question of Terry. Do you remember what the question was about Beverly's line?
Yeah, sure. When Troy mentions the Borg,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Crusher says something along the lines of, we haven't heard from the Borg in 10 years. But I'm like, well, we actually kind of had some Borg elements in seasons 1 and 2. So I didn't see how that was possible. When Borgatti, the Borg Girardi hybrid, shows up at the end of season 2, and then presents herself as the Borg, and that the Borg want to join the Federation. I thought, well, isn't that like a contact with the Borg? Has it been 10 years since the end of season 2, whatever? But apparently, no, it's because those are sort of a faction of the Borg that have spun off and have become good Borg, whatever that means.
Yeah.
I guess they don't assimilate people. And that the true Borg were still out there, and they were weak at this point. I guess because of whatever happened at the end of First Contact, and they were defeated and all these things. So,
and Voyager, don't forget Voyager too.
In Voyager, right? Exactly.
Big finale was Janeway defeating the Queen in that timeline. But as the Queen has said in First Contact and other places, time is not necessarily just one-dimensional. So from there we go on to Jack is now at the end of a Borg time conduit, whatever they call it, warp conduit, and he's going to go aboard the ship. And on the Titan, it seems as if they just sort of said, "Well, off he goes."
Well, I mean, Picard does make mention that he asked Data if they were able to track him, and they also show Jack disabling the transponder for the shuttle. But
right,
I don't know. You would think they would have gotten a heading or something like that from I don't know, but they made
the shuttle bay. I don't know. Off he goes. Oh, so back to season 2 for a second. 7 of 9 on the Stargazer said that the ship had some kind of Borg technology, which apparently decided they aren't going to do that anymore. So that's sort of also another thing that doesn't carry over to season 3. Anywho, here we are on our way to sickbay, where we find out the real plan the changelings have been doing in terms of why no one's been wanting to use this transporter. Commander Rowe didn't want to use a transporter. Vadic didn't want to use a transporter. And it's all because the changelings have been sabotaging the transporter technology.
Right. They've been, I guess, patching people's DNA with a certain code that we find out later on leads to a certain effect. And of course, that they also need Jack because he's a transmitter.
Yes. As opposed to Picard, who was a trans receiver. Yeah.
Right.
Trans.
Well, no, trans. No, just a receiver.
No transgender part in this. But there is an allegory here, though, because I thought that when the episode turned to the young people whose frontal lobes have not yet developed being Borgified, being assimilated, it did remind me in terms of the whole grooming controversy about LGBT people turning people into, something they're not, into the trans opponents saying that we are trying to convert people. My own late wife used to accuse me of being a Borg because I was being assimilated. And I said, no, it's more like the Cylons, actually.
Well, yeah, I mean, there also have been arguments from some people pushing legislation, the anti-trans legislation, that, sometimes they pushed it out to 25 years or 26 years, and they've made the argument, well, your brain isn't fully developed until then, and blah, 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 which it plays a key point in this episode.
Yes. And oh my goodness, the non-binary actor, I've reached out to them, hoping we get an interview. We'll see. There it is. Thank you so much, Dawn. I would absolutely love to talk to you. Jin Malay, Jin is non-binary and plays non-binary Ensign Kovarin Esmar. So
Okay.
they play a non-binary character, and they are a non-binary actor. And I'm going to get to interview them soon. And they end up taking control of the Titan with LaForge's 2 young daughters and the Bajoran tactical officer. Right. They all become Borgified, and then people start shooting, pew, 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 pew. And the old folks start running for the turbo lift. Somebody else, I caught this on my 3rd viewing, somebody else set for stun.
Yes. Well, Captain Shaw does. Captain Shaw says, you know,
Cod Stash, you can talk
to. To avoid killing their fellow crew people, so that, you know, hopefully if they're able to convert them back, that, you know, they still have a full crew. But yeah, in between that and everything, though, there's Frontier Day and the fleet, and
guess who comes back?
Yes, who comes back?
So in Best of Both Worlds, Part 1 and 2,
right,
Commander Shelby wanted Riker's job, thinking Riker's going to go off and be a captain.
Right.
And he's like, with Picard being assimilated, no, I'm still in charge here, and you're not in charge. And Shelby has this whole plan for capturing the Borg and everything else. And now she's an admiral in charge of, as Riker says, of all things, a Borgified program to unite the fleet, control the fleet.
Coordinate the fleet in like as one unit, and they show that off. And actually, what's even more amazing is that we get a nice shot of the Enterprise F leaving.
Yes, there it is. It comes out of space dock. NCC 1701F. Happy Frontier Day.
Right.
And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's got a lot of different configurations, but it looks huge. Yes. And it's leading the whole Frontier Day celebration.
Right. And we also get mention of the NX-01, and that's why the Enterprise is leading Frontier Day, because it was the first ship back in the day with Captain Archer.
In this current era, 250 years prior.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, so then she goes out there and they do this little sync up kind of thing where all the ships get into formation. But meanwhile, Jack has been taken by the Borg Queen aboard the Borg cube, and I guess has been plugged into whatever they needed as a power source to be able to broadcast his abilities out to everybody. And of course, that means everybody 25 years and younger who have taken the transporter at some point and have this like patched DNA are all of a sudden Borgified in some way, although it looks kind of organic. It doesn't look mechanical so much as in past seasons of Star Trek.
And I think Crusher and Data and the Forge actually have a discussion about that, about how this is not nano things. This is not something physiological, as it's organic. And that, as Jack being a transmitter, is basically allowing the fleet to be compromised, to be Borgified, to be assimilated. An interesting fact, by the way, a little detail. So April 12th is apparently Frontier Day, and the episode airs on the West Coast at midnight on April 12th into the 13th. Right. Interesting timing, Terry Matalis. Thank you for that. It was very interesting that you make that all sync up. Yes. Then what's interesting is they've got to run. So they're shooting pew, pew, pew. They're running to the turbo lift, and there's this dramatic scene, just an audio, of a starship that regains its power, the Excelsior, one of my favorites.
Right.
And this is the new, of course, 25th century Excelsior. And again, the ship is lost. And they decide, holy crap. Again, Captain Shaw has the idea, let's go to the maintenance deck, because that way we can find a repair shuttle and get out of here. Two things about Captain Shaw in this episode so far. Unlike Picard in First Contact, who said they're no longer our crew, shoot them with a machine gun, rip open their hearts.
Right.
Shaw wants to save them by shooting with just stun setting. And he has the brilliant idea to, as an engineer, use that frequency that the captain of the Excelsior says to clue in, let's get to the maintenance deck. And then, I don't really get this. Picard taps his comm badge and says, everyone go to the maintenance deck. Doesn't everybody hear that?
Yeah, obviously.
I mean, it's like a party line, you know, hello.
Picard said, my crew do show up there too at some point, but I mean,
they do.
Yeah.
But Troy has a great line. He says, "No, I've never been so happy to see so many wrinkles."
That's right. When the turbo lift opens and they're both aiming phasers at each other at that point. Yeah, because they don't know.
But Jerry Ryan, 7 of 9, has the idea that, well, it apparently only affects the younger generation. That's when we start putting together what Data and LaForge and Crusher were talking about being 25. So now we're all on the same page, and we're about to get into the hangar deck, for some reason LaForge can't open the door, and here comes the Borg.
Yes. Right. And a firefight ensues.
Yeah, a shootout. Who leads the charge? Captain Shaw, defending his ship.
Which is great, because I gotta say, up to that point, he was sort of like an Uber driver. They're putting together all these incredible, important plot lines, and they're coming up with basically the bare outlines of the plot, and it's basically the TNG crew in the conference center, and Shaw is on the deck, and nobody's telling him anything, and I kind of laugh because Picard basically says, hey, we have to go to sector 001 or the Sol sector, and he's like, okay, let's go.
Start the meter.
It
is funny too that
Mr. Uber driver, I'll give you 5 stars if you take it back home to Earth.
5 stars. Gary Madeline said on Twitter, people said, why isn't he in the conference room with the bridge crew, the TNG crew? They're all around the table. Shouldn't Captain Shaw be there like he was in the last meeting? Well, Terry Madeline explained, well, he's burying the dead members of his crew. Tavine, for example.
Yeah, well, not only that, like just about everyone around the table is higher rank than Captain Shaw at that point, so at least, captain and above, pretty much. Commodore, captain, admiral. So really, they don't have to clue him in on anything, if they don't really want to, and they certainly don't. And when Picard says, take us to Earth, he doesn't even explain really, except
that's our only option, he says. Of course it is.
I mean, everybody knows at that point, of course, that the plot revolves around Frontier Day. So the fact that they're going to Earth isn't a big shock.
It's just a question of what's going to happen when we get there. And when we get there, we see that the fleet has basically slowly been taken over. So now here we are in the shuttle. The crew has escaped, but there's one person who didn't make the shuttle. Actually, 3 people who didn't make the shuttle. Okay. And for me, what a shock. What a shock that they killed Todd Stashwick's character, Liam Shaw. Right. I love Captain Shaw. I saw him as being the lead of Star Trek Legacy or another show, or even a short treks where he basically just tells people no all the time. And I literally loved his character. I loved the actor. And I thought he brought something different to Star Trek, The Next Generation, and all the other series that we haven't seen before. We haven't seen a captain like that, a grease monkey, a dipshit from Chicago. And a
survivor of Wolf, I can't remember.
359. And 359. Someone brought this up. It's sort of like a replay of what happened on the Constance.
Yes.
They have to get on the shuttle. Someone's not going to get on there. And it's Shaw this time. And
I think there was space this time for everybody. If they
he could have. There was room. But
it's not like they picked him. But yeah, it was a sort of similar situation. And this time he was the commander in charge, and decided to sacrifice himself so that everybody else could escape.
And he delivers the line of the episode. I mean, there were great lines, lots of great lines. No, you have the con. It's not my ship anymore. You have the con, 7 of 9.
Right. He calls her 7 of 9. He doesn't dead name her anymore.
Not dead naming her. And, she didn't get emotional about it, but you could see it definitely had a toll, and the great death scene. And surprise, surprise, tell me what you, as our resident lesbian, thought of Raffi joining 7 of 9's side and telling Picard, get on the shuttle, get out of here, we got this. What did you think?
She's like, I'm not going to leave you behind, jumps in there. And
start shooting again. There's still more officers coming their way.
Did she say something like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not going to do that again, or something like that?
I don't think she said again, but there's no chance, or no chance I'm going to leave you alone. Yeah.
Right. And so she stays with Seven. I mean, as any lesbian would. And, helps her defend the ship. And then, of course, Seven tells the TNG OG crew that, she'll figure out a way to get out of this. So when we last see Seven and Rafi, or what do they call Safi, right?
Safi.
The ship name we have for them.
Yes, the ship.
Is, they're still in the middle of the shootout with the board crew members, and we don't know what their fate is. But, the TNG crew now gets on the shuttle. My favorite moment actually happens right there when
Data.
when LaForge basically tells Data that he needs to
more positive,
be more positive, and Data turns around with a smile, looks at him, and goes, "I hope we die quickly."
Weiner is so talented. I love that, and he smiles like this goofy smile, like
big smile on his face.
Oh my God!
Great. That moment was great. And then the second greatest moment is when we find out what the destination of that shuttle is, because LaForge has taken control, and of course he takes them to the
Hangar 12 at the museum, and we've all been waiting. What is behind Hangar 12? I think everyone guessed what it was.
Right.
Somehow LaForge put together what was broken. The NCT-1701D.
But there's this, just before that, there's this great moment where LaForge says, obviously we can't use the Enterprise E. And then everybody turns around and
turns to look at the Worf. And Worf's like, that was not my fault. Whatever that was.
Whatever that was. Well, I mean, we're meant to infer, of course, because I guess, I think Terry Matalas mentions that Worf was the captain of the Enterprise E
after Picard, when he went to help the Romulans.
Right.
The captain, and something happened.
Something happened. I guess yet another Enterprise crew member destroys the Enterprise in some way, or does something. I would have liked to have seen the Enterprise E, to be honest. But I mean, I'm completely not surprised. Actually, I was very surprised in the moment, because I'm sort of naive and wasn't really following what everybody else was saying. But yes, the hangar doors open of the old space dock, and in there is the Enterprise D in all her glory.
And with just a few magic lines of writing, LaForge explains, well, we couldn't leave it on Veridian 3 from Generations.
The saucer section.
Yeah, the saucer section. So we brought that back, and I got the engines and the other sections from another ship.
Yeah, you got the drive unit from the Syracuse, is what he says. Because that was also something somebody else is saying, that the battle deck or whatever, after they separate, was destroyed. And so how could they, put the Enterprise back together? So I guess it was put together with two different pieces. They picked up the saucer section from Veridian 3 in order to avoid a prime directive issue. And that LaForge has been putting it all back together again and getting it ship shape.
Over 20 years, he said.
For 20 years, yeah. And he's in that this was going to be a surprise for everybody.
At some point. Also, I guess while he was there, he picked up Kirk's bones and brought them back to Daystrom. It's interesting that the Enterprise D is, how can I put it? It looks so much better because it's upscaled. We're looking at it in a 4K world instead of the 1980s.
Right.
And I mean, we saw it in the Generations movie, and it looked great.
Right.
But it looks beautiful. I mean, just
fantastic. It looks a little more three-dimensional, like the ports, and with all the lights, it somehow seems a little less flat. So I don't know if they use the model or CGI. I assume everything is CGI at this point. So they just have better technology. Actually, the same. You notice the same thing with the Borg cube.
Yeah,
the cube isn't flat surfaces. It has actually like little kind of exterior little cube sections kind of like protruding all over it. So we get the sense that this is actually a more advanced design of the Borg cube as well.
And before we get back to the D, let's talk about the Borg for a second, because unlike previous Borg ships, which are sterile and clean and sort of like this factory, this is a freaking mess. I mean, there's wires and cables and shit all over the place. Right. And this explains, I think, a little bit, or hints at, that in episode part 10, which is called The Last Generation, we're going to understand a little bit about why the Borg have come to Jack to assimilate the fleet and Starfleet. They must have had some kind of continued downfall since Janeway, since First Contact.
Right. And you know, at some point they also must have put together the transwarp corridors or came up with new technology, because Janeway, of course, destroys them all as she escapes, you know, back to Earth at the end of Voyager. So some kind of singularity opens up or whatever, and then the Borg cube comes out, and then Jack goes in foolishly, you know, being the young foolish guy he is, and thinks he can shoot the Borg queen, who we don't actually see in the episode. We only see the back of her, and it looks like she's going to look different in some way, like a little bigger in some way. It looked like, I don't know, it looked massive. It looked, I don't know, more monstrous, I guess is a good word for it. And then, of course, the little wires come out and hook up to Jack, and his eyes turn black. And then we get the whole thing of the fleet being assimilated, or the young people in the fleet being assimilated. So
it's a shame that the actress who played the Borg Queen in season 2 passed away prior to the season beginning. But it is a treat to have Alice, is it pronounced Krieg? Krieg? I don't know how to pronounce her name. She's back from First Contact and from the Voyager finale. She's back playing the Borg Queen again.
Yes, in fact, they dropped that little bit. You see it all the way at the end of the credits, you know, where they're listing all the special guest stars. They list right there.
Great stuff. So what did you think when they step out of the turbo lift and there they are on the bridge of the D? Tell me what your thoughts were, because I have a ton of thoughts, but I want to hear yours.
You know, I was wondering, they didn't go, okay, this is kind of funny, but they didn't go with the Generations lighting. You know, in Generations, the lighting was very dark and very moody. I guess they wanted to go much more cinematic than the series, which had just ended, right? So this is somewhere in between those two things. The other thing is because it is in 4K, you get to see a lot more detail of things, like the fabric of the chairs and that kind of stuff. They also
play on Worf's tactical console,
right? And of course, Worf has a few more comedy moments talking about how I prefer the tactical layout and the phaser banks and all that of the E. I was like, well, maybe you shouldn't have destroyed it then.
Shut up, Worf. I like how Deanna is the one who, you know, for whatever reason, in the last season of Star Trek Next Generation, had a romance with Worf, and she seems to be the one who shuts him down more often than not.
Yeah, he keeps complaining about the D's, you know, offensive capabilities, and finally they shut him down twice and goes, oh, it's fine, it's good.
It's fine, love it, great.
Great.
Picard Patrick Stewart has a comedy line too. Now that we're all together and finally reunited, I realize what I've missed all this time, the carpeting.
Right. You know, it's funny because looking at the D through the modern eyes of, like, you know, what the starship designs are now, I thought it looked actually more 70s than 80s in a different way. You know, it had a big 70s feel. Of course, Gene Roddenberry was directly involved back then.
And they built it in the 70s. I mean, the show launched in 89, but I mean, I think it was not built, but it was designed, you know, during the era of Star Trek, the motion picture and everything else. And in the early 80s. And it was 87, I think it debuted. Is that right?
It was late 80s. I'm sorry. I
think it was 87.
Bad fan. I don't remember the exact date.
I'm pretty sure. And here's the funny thing. It looks antiquated compared to the Stargazer, compared to the Titan, but it's home. It's like going home.
Yeah, there's that nice scene where Picard walks up to the plaque on the bridge, you know, commemorating the Enterprise. And you know, it even that looks much better. You know, that looks very, I don't know, it just looks very cool. And you know, that, you know, he also has that great moment, that touching moment where he basically says, you know, and he does this more than once, you know, I can't ask you to, you know, I think he does that in every season of Picard, you know, where he tells everyone, I can't ask you to put your lives at risk or whatever.
Oh, shut up.
yeah. Everyone basically says, we're family, you know, you don't.
Right. And Troy has the line saying, and Jack and LaForge's daughters too. We're all family.
Yeah.
Interesting little detail.
Yeah.
Geordi's back piloting the ship like he was in season 1, the blind pilot. But Picard orders Data to take the ship out and engage. I thought that was interesting. Usually Data is just the ops person, but whatever, it doesn't matter. They're on their way.
He was, I think in first season, he was navigation.
Yeah. Setting the course.
So Data takes the left seat. LaForge takes the right seat. Picard, of course, sits down. I like the way they sit down and they start swinging panels, like, let's get to business, like, and
they gave Beverly something to do too. All things are online. Okay, thank you, Beverly.
Well, someone made the point. Someone made a point. I saw somebody on Twitter say, like, oh, it's impossible. They can't get the D, working again and blah, 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 because they need this huge crew and yada, yada. And I don't know who's in engineering.
Nobody, I don't think.
I guess there's nobody. Everything's automated.
About it though. Think about it. Scotty in Star Trek 3 was able to get the Enterprise, the original refit Enterprise, functioning with just Chekhov, McCoy, pretending to be Spock, Captain Kirk, and himself, and Sulu, of course, at the helm. So if they have almost like 2 more people on a ship 150 years later, I guess that the automated systems are more functional. One thing, though, LaForge says in the shuttle approaching the D, well, things are analog. We need an analog ship.
Yeah, which is not really analog. No, it's not analog. It's just...
That's just sort of like,
It's just not networked.
Not networked, yes.
Like all the other ships, which is what they really needed. And apparently the E would have worked too if... I keep going back.
Or hadn't fucked it up. Too funny.
It would have been really cool to see the D and the E flying together. Or some people really wanted to see the A and the D.
NCC and 1701A would have been really, having that crew on the A would have blown my mind. That would have been.
Yeah, although I guess, like the technology would have been like way, whatever they have to do for the last episode, I imagine will probably require some sort of battle or something, because LaForge does make the mention that he's got the drones like loading up the photon torpedo bays and stuff like that. I don't think he won't mention that. If they say if you present a gun in the first act, you have to fire it in the last act. But so if you're going to load up the Enterprise D with photon torpedoes, you're going to need to use them at some point.
So let me hear what your dislikes were. What were your thumbs downs, if anything, from this episode? Was there anything you watched it twice and said, that could have been better, or I didn't like that?
A little bit of the explanation of the DNA, like why, your frontal lobe has anything to do with it propagating. I gave him a pass. Everything's always technobabble and and doesn't really pass the sniff test usually and you have to suspend disbelief. Too many people go, oh, the Heisenberg compensators, there's no such thing as that, and how can you ever have a transporter? It would never work. Yeah, okay, well, but it's fun, so you have to kind of suspend your disbelief there. I know they probably did it to save money on the special effects budget, but when they're in the turbo lift and we get a layout of the fleet, the little dots of all the fleet names, and then we get the audio of the Excelsior captain saying, they've managed to take over the ship again. They've managed to reestablish control of the ship, and then we get like, oh no, we're getting pulled into this area. They're gonna fire and it's blue, and then beep, the dot goes away, and I'm like. It was a nice graphical representation of whatever happened, but it would have been nice if we had seen like a video of the Excelsior bridge with the captain, broadcasting that they've been able to, on this emergency maintenance line that, I guess they're still able to use, even though the Borg have taken over communications, that, if we had been able to see a little bit of visual of the bridge and then, some sort of firing or whatever, that would have been cool. Sort of like we actually get a moment with Shelby, right? Where where she also, is saying, we're being attacked and blah, blah, blah. And then two young people turn around and actually fire phases at her. We see it hit her here and here, and it cuts off right at that moment. But, we are to assume that she got vaporized.
No tears here for Shelby.
No,
Sorry. No tears. I'm perfectly fine seeing her bite the dust.
Yeah. Also, we haven't mentioned when they show up to this sector 001, their ship gets immediately taken control of, just like all the other ships, into this
fleet mode or something.
Fleet mode or whatever, and then they can't turn it off. And I'm saying, really, they don't have an override for fleet mode? Like, somebody didn't decide.
Pull the plug.
If all the ships are in fleet mode, there's no way for anybody to override it, and you're screwed. I mean, that seems awful short-sighted and foolhardy of whoever decided that was the right design for that stuff. And of course, Riker makes the joke about the irony, of Shelby like being all for this fleet mode, when of course she was so anti-Borg before, and this is sort of like a Borg way of approaching, Starfleet.
Very much so.
Yeah.
My downs or dislikes was losing Todd Stashwick, losing Liam.
Ooh, yeah, that's a big one. Actually, that was shocking.
Terry Matalis says, "Oh, he'll be back. He's going to be the engineering EMH on Star Trek Legacy." And I asked him, I said, "You're going to have him say no a lot, right?" We'll see. Well, I'd love to see him back in some form. Even I said, what about doing a series or flashbacks or something where it's his first command, or how he got to be captain or something? Anyway,
I don't want a prequel. I want something post TNG.
Okay. Okay.
I want something that is a brand new territory for us. I don't want something that, we see a young, Captain Shaw. I want to see, if we're not going to get him, I guess an EMH version of him would be great too. But I mean, I would caution against that, because I mean, like, if you're going to create an EMH of an engineer, wouldn't you pick like the greatest engineer in Starfleet history?
O'Brien.
O'Brien,
O'Brien, Scotty,
or Scotty, or you're not going to pick some dude who, I guess he was an engineer, but he was a captain. If he was all that great an engineer, they wouldn't have let him become a captain.
I think he was joking, but yeah, that's absolutely true. And the only other down I felt was that they should have had some kind of protocol to deal with the fact, oh, this guy can control people's minds, and maybe he won't take the news so well, so let's take some precautions besides having two beefy guys outside his door.
Yeah. Two beefy guys that it took him 2 seconds to take control of, and then he even throws in the Borg line of it being futile.
Yes,
right?
He says it's futility. He says with his British accent. Yes. Oh, I love Ed Spilliers. Oh my God, listening to him, I could listen to him read the phone book. It's just wonderful.
He's a great actor, but I mean, if he doesn't get on that shuttle and go off to see the Borg, nothing happens at Frontier Day. So
right.
That's quite a gamble the Borg took.
Yeah. Well, I guess they were basically expecting this. The other thing is just a little detail. So there's always been an argument about when you beam down somewhere or beam up somewhere, are you the same person, or are you a recreation of the person? In other words, does the transporter destroy you and then rebuild you in the chamber, or are you actually being matter transported from one place to another? And this episode seems to settle that debate, just like the last episode settled the debate. It's not a window, it's a view screen that opens up into space if we wanted to. This episode settles the debate by saying, yes, the computer has a record of everyone's DNA and everyone's pattern, and it builds you from that, not necessarily moving. It's not really a transporter as much as a recreator. And I thought that to be interesting, just as a sci-fi buff.
I don't know. I mean, I do like the explanation though of this idea. Data gives this explanation that they basically have, that people all have some common code that that
across species,
across species. So each species has like a bunch of common code, and so to prevent having to basically do the work of decoding that and recoding that, they're able to just use this bunch of code to do that. Actually, that wasn't something they had to put in there, but actually, as somebody who knows how to code, actually that makes logical sense that they wouldn't do that for everybody. But yeah, I don't know. That's always been a creepy aspect of transporters, right? Is it really you on the other end, or just it reminds me of that Hugh Jackman movie where he keeps performing this one trick, and it's actually what's going on is that he just keeps dying over and over again,
Yes.
and he has all these clones.
Well,
of
very
himself.
Barkley of you to be afraid of the transporter. I thought we'd see Barkley and Miles O'Brien. Maybe we'll see them in the last episode. Who knows? I know some details. You and I are very lucky we get to watch the episode next Monday.
Yeah.
So if you're open to it, maybe we do another one of these to wrap up the whole series. My favorite moment is still probably the D, is probably getting to see the Enterprise D and getting. Some fans said to me, maybe they went to a place where there's a recreation already built, but I think Paramount rebuilt the set from the original designs because it looks just so good. As you mentioned, very good point, by the way. The lighting is very TNG series as opposed to Generations movie. Yeah. So I do think that they rebuilt it, but such detail.
Yeah, I have a feeling that isn't like the original. So they went back to whatever designs they had, because like the plaque isn't the same. Actually, it's up, it's quite clearly a different plaque. I think actually looking at the seating or the chairs, that I think they actually used this different material. But they were just slight differences, and the lighting, while it wasn't really TNG series, it's a little bit better than TNG series. There is some dimension to that lighting. It isn't like flat sitcom lighting, almost like you saw in TNG. So they did minor tweaks, but I think they understood that the fans wanted to see a faithful recreation of the Enterprise D, and really wouldn't have, would probably go nuts if they started changing things.
They didn't use the original first season chairs for the helmsman and the ops navigator person, because those were like recliners, if you remember.
Oh, yeah, they were like more recliners.
Instead, the later seasons, more erect chairs. Also, when Troy kept giving Worf shit, I was expecting, maybe this is on the cutting room floor, I was expecting Worf to say something about, well, Deanna, I wasn't the one who crashed the saucer section. You did that. Which I always thought was funny. They finally let her drive, and look what happens. She crashes.
And also the first curse in TNG history happened in that moment.
Oh, shit, says Data.
That's when Data goes, yeah.
Some people have been arguing that, Picard shouldn't be cursing and other people shouldn't be cursing. You know what I read? Patrick Stewart ad-libbed in the story in the holodeck recreation of 10 Forward LA. He was talking about his experience with Jack Crusher, the original Jack Crusher, on the shuttle, and he ad-libbed the word fucking in that story, which I think is great because A, it's very in character, and B, it was just not a natural evolution of him telling the story. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea that nobody curses in the future is far, even a perfect future where everybody's supposed to be equal. I guess it's not as perfect as Gene Roddenberry's vision anymore, but still, everyone clearly works together and does a good job of basically, there's still going to be interpersonal conflicts. People are people, but those aren't necessarily based off of the same things that we have interpersonal conflicts over, whether somebody is transgender, non-binary, what their race is, what their species is, so those things aren't the source of interpersonal conflict. It's whether you got turned into Locutus and killed a whole bunch of people.
Well, you teed me up great, because I wanted to segue into something that means something to both you and me. We're both transgender, identify as trans women, she, her, and I'm wondering if you're satisfied with the level of LGBTQ representation that you've seen in Picard season 3. Now, it's not Discovery. It's not even Strange New Worlds, which I was arguing earlier tonight on Twitter. Strange New Worlds has a helmsman who identifies as queer. Melissa Navia said, a nurse, Christine Chappell, a legacy character who came out as bisexual in season 1, at least hinted at it. And, there's entirely possibly more trans representation coming in season 2.
Mhm.
We had a villain who was trans non-binary, and I bet we'll see them again. And now, of course, we have at least the non-binary ensign who's leading the fleet aboard the Titan.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering what your feelings are. Do you feel like is your shipping not satisfied in terms of Raffi and Seven?
Um, to be honest, I guess I am such a TNG nerd, and in many different ways. Next Generation was my Star Trek. I mean, I grew up watching all the original series reruns on Channel 11, WPIX in New York.
WPIX, yes, 11 alive.
So I was 9 years old in 1980. So I did see a lot of the the original series in the 70s, which by then, of course, were repeats.
Yes.
So I really love Star Trek. But then when TNG came out, in a lot of different ways, that became my Star Trek, right? That was the one that I saw live for all those seasons. So I must confess that I think I've been so just geeking out so much at all the TNG stuff that I really haven't been paying attention much to the LGBTQ plus stuff. However, in retrospect, I think, they went so heavy in season 2 that season 3 just, suffers in comparison, But of course, in a lot of different ways, I think Picard season 3 is a love letter to TNG. And what I love about it is the fact that it feels very much like the movies, because there's only 10 episodes. It feels like they made a bunch of movies and put them back to back to back. And now that we even have the Enterprise D, it feels like we can forget about Nemesis. We can, we even have Data back. We don't, all these things. It feels a little bit like Rise of Skywalker, how it kind of retconned all this stuff from Last Jedi, like they put, they were like, okay, forget about all that stuff. This is really what we meant. And so it has a little bit of that kind of feeling, season 3. So, I mean, I didn't even know that Ensign was non-binary, because they're an alien.
Right.
So there aren't any kind of the same visual cues, and I don't think we're going to get pronouns at any point. I think that I would have liked, I would have loved to have seen a little scene where like Raffi just like kissed Seven really quickly in that battle scene and says, "I'm staying with you." That would have really,
or held her hand. Yeah, touched
held her hand, done something like that. I mean, they're in the middle of a firefight. Yeah, I understand that. But I mean, like just something like that would have made my little lesbian heart leap with joy. And, who knows what happens in episode 10.
I do.
There is, yeah, well, you have a direct line to Terry.
I'm sorry. I can't say.
I
can't say. I can only say that they are serving on a starship. And at least even if Raffi is sort of, I don't know what her rank is. I don't know what her job is. She's Starfleet Intelligence, right?
She was Starfleet Intelligence, right? So she
right.
wasn't
so not really enlisted or anything, but 7 of 9 is very much involved in running the ship and now is acting captain because the captain's dead. Yeah. So I think whatever happens in episode part 10 of The Last Generation, I think
she said with a little knowing grin on her face.
I think
the narrator.
I think
narrator.
That
she absolutely.
I think there will be a resolution of some kind. That's all I can say. It will be addressed, shall we say? And I don't know what else happens in the episode. I'm really confused as to how the old D is going to face off against the entire fleet. How they're going to get Jack back, how they're going to unborg everybody, but leave it to the crew of the D to find a way. This is just incredible being able to talk to you about this. And I wanted to also say that while I don't watch the show for its LGBTQ elements either, I watch it as a fan of the original series, or as the Lower Decks folks called it, those old scientists, TOS. Right. I watched it in the late 60s, early 70s in reruns. I actually didn't like the show when it was airing live. I preferred to watch Batman because I was 5. Okay. So I didn't watch, I knew it existed. I knew it was there, but it wasn't for me. Lost in Space was much more fun, much more my flavor of sci-fi back then. And Batman was on against it. So come on, Batman,
Yeah.
Plus, the animation theme opening and everything. But I did catch it in the 70s and reruns. And then, like you, my Trek love was reborn by the Next Generation. And then DS9 came along and I learned a different kind of love, and Voyager. And I know Voyager is very controversial too. But
Voyager's actually, in all honesty, when I've rewatched these episodes, a lot of these shows, I watch DS9, but I'm not as hardcore a fan of DS9, to be honest.
Okay.
And TNG was great, but Voyager was really, really good. And those are the shows I've gone and rewatched probably more episodes, even more than TNG. As much as I love TNG, Voyager is really up there. I mean, having 7 of 9, in a cat suit the whole time didn't hurt.
It does have its attractions. I will say, our friend, I think you're friends with her, Vendi Beth Glenn, who had me on her podcast talking about She-Hulk. She hates Voyager with a passion. And we have this argument all the time about the value of Voyager. And I respect that. I respect that it's not everybody's cup of tea.
Yeah.
I will tell all the fans who are watching right now, if you love TNG, you will love what you see on episode 9 and 10. And you will feel, as I wrote on Twitter, this is Star Trek 11. It's a 10-hour movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it puts to rest all the crap we endured from Nemesis 20 effing years ago. Yeah. And we have our crew back. We have our ship back. We got data.
Which is, by the way, the true reason why Raffi and Seven stayed behind. We shouldn't be remiss with that. Thematically, it's so that we would get the TNG crew and only the TNG crew on the Enterprise D.
It would have been odd to have 7 of 9 or Raffi sitting in the back saying, "Yeah, well, here we are, old ship." Oh, by the way, did you catch this line? When they're in the maintenance deck and they're trying to do the shuttle door opening, 7 says to LaForge, "Your robot's right."
Yeah, I saw that. And Data gives a little look like,
excuse me?
I'm not even, I mean, Picard is every bit a robot now.
They actually have, it's funny, they've addressed that more than they ever did in season 2.
Yeah.
The fact that he's synthetic now. And I still wonder about aspects of that, but I guess maybe we'll find out in novelizations or something else. Mm-hmm. Any last thoughts? We're at an hour, and I just wanted to say I'm so grateful to talk to you, and I miss you, and I love you.
Oh. Well, I am awesome, so I don't blame you.
Who could?
And I very much appreciate the fact that when I do have a question, you pass them on to Terry for me. So I am the conduit.
I am the transwarp conduit. Yes,
exactly. I may not have direct contact to him, but there are very few people in the world who can go, "Hey, what's up with this?" and then actually have the show creator, get the show creator's response back in 20 minutes. But yeah, I very much appreciate that. Even maybe one day I'll get to meet Terry and all the rest of them as well. But I'm very much looking forward to episode 10. I can't wait. I know they're also having the IMAX screenings in Orlando. So, I mean, by then I will have already seen episode 10. But,
I still want to see it on a big screen. That'd be freaking cool.
Yeah, it would be really nice to see it on a true IMAX screen. I'm sad the ride is almost over.
Yeah.
That's the overwhelming feeling. I remember when we got to see the first 6 episodes, and before episode 1 even aired, and I'm thinking, oh my God, it's going to be 10 weeks before, we get this all unraveled. And then they've been piecing out, 1 or 2 episodes at a time for us now so that we don't get too far ahead. But I can't believe we're 10 weeks later. I've rewatched them all on Paramount Plus, as a good subscriber and Star Trek fan should, to help them with their views. And it's been, it's been rewatchable, I haven't felt like, oh God, this part is boring, or anything like that. Or let me fast forward. Yeah, it's everything has been incredible. I look forward to see what happens in episode 10. And I look forward to hopefully having some trans representation in future shows that are actually reflect
The real world.
What's going on? I mean, there's so much anti-trans legislation out there. There are over 400 pieces. We're getting like 500 pieces up to like that of anti-trans legislation around the country. And Star Trek has traditionally been a platform for social commentary. And I think while they've made some half steps along these lines, you know, what they've, in all honesty, they've taken the easy way out by casting non-binary folks. There is a way, I think. I mean, I've even described to you, you know, some plot lines or
be careful. Do you want to leak those out here? I don't want people to steal them from you.
No. I'm not gonna tell anybody of ways that they could include trans people in a way that would be true to the era, but also reflect some of the reality of trans women today. Because, you know, obviously, you know, technology has probably advanced to the point that you couldn't tell the difference between a trans person and a cisgender person probably, you know, by the time Star Trek rolls around.
I think you can't tell.
Huh?
I still think you can't tell. Not always. We can always tell, you know, that meme.
Yeah, I know that, but I think there's a way of handling it so that, you know, I think there's got to be people who transition maybe later in life in the Star Trek universe, and all of a sudden have to get used to a whole new way of being and living, you know, even if there is no sexism in the 20.
Well, let me interrupt by saying to the showrunners and executives who are watching this at Paramount, you don't have to make it a trans theme episode.
Yeah.
But even if you had a transgender person doing their job, living their best life, and being trans is just one part of their experience, that would be a step. That would be a step. I think that step is essential.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, I would love to see what you're talking about in terms of an episode that addresses our modern conflict, because that's what Star Trek is best at. Taking modern problems, putting them in a future frame and saying, look at this shit.
I think, you know, not every Federation planet has got to be, you know, they all have their own mores and morality. And I'm sure there's got to be places where not everybody is accepted for everything. I mean, it would be really nice to see an actual trans crew person, you know, that
played by a trans actor.
Played by a trans actor facing a lot of the challenges that we're seeing today, because we need much more trans people in media right now, because for a lot of people who have never met a trans person, I think the number is up to like 25% of people say they've met a trans person, but something like 8 of 9 have said they met a gay person. I mean, just knowing a trans person makes a big difference. And for those people who will never even get close enough to a trans person because they resist, you know, they believe us to be demons or what have you, you know.
Mutants, yeah.
Mutants and demons, you know, and wouldn't knowingly put themselves in the position of meeting a trans person. Having somebody there in your living room, you know, week after week after week in a hopefully a long-running series, I think can only make all the difference in the world. I mean, Strange New Worlds had a trans person, a trans actress actually, you know, in it, but at no point I think were they addressed to even be trans. And
they used they, them pronouns, but that was the closest you came to it.
Right.
Yeah. And honestly, if you're playing Star Trek bingo, Maia just said 8 of 9, which is close to 7 of 9. And she said resist. So mark those on your bingo cards. This is definitely a Trek expert. This is a trans advocate. This is a person you should follow. Maia, tell us your socials so we can follow you, please.
I am at Melody Maia on Instagram. Melody, and I spell Maia Maia. And I'm also on YouTube, also youtube.com/Melody Maia, spelled the same way. And my Twitter is at Maia Monet, because some putz took my Melody Maia and only has 1 post in the last 5 years and like 0 following, 1 person, 0 followers. Somebody's sitting on that ID. You know,
well,
and
I find them and go to their house.
But I am at Maia Monet on Twitter, and I am active on there too.
I am at Life After Dawn across all social except for Snapchat and TikTok. Yes, believe it or not, I am on TikTok. There I'm Dawn Ennis. And I'm so grateful for your time. I'm so grateful for your friendship and your love. And we'll see what happens next week. Live long and prosper, Maia.
Yeah, for us, just a few days, 6 days. So yeah, I'm very excited. Oh, one last point before
Oh,
we
what
go.
is it? Oh,
One,
sure.
one of the things
I'll
I
take back my
really love,
hand. There we go.
I can only do it with one hand. I think it's
You're
because
fine. You're fine.
yeah, because I
What's
was
the
a
last
big
point?
contractor for many years, and I think I did bad things to this hand. So it can't really
Hey, what you do in your private time is your business.
yeah, okay. But anyway, when the Enterprise D warps away right after Picard goes engage.
Yes.
Which is of course an amazing callback. The sound it makes, the warp sound, it's the warp sound from Next Generation. It isn't one of the more updated kind of things that you see in the current ships and the sounds you hear in the current ships. So it was an audio callback, and I really appreciated that. I could just listen to that over and over and over again. And it reminds me of the very first time I saw the Enterprise D as a kid, when they were showing previews of the new series. And I remember being like gobsmacked at this design. It was so radically different from the original series, and really radically different from all the designs they've had since.
Yes.
The
fat one, they called it in the bar.
The fat one. But it has all these curves, and it's all compound curves and stuff like that. That even the in some ways the design of the current ships is a little bit of that, and a lot of the old ship designs. The Constitution
class kind of stuff.
Yes.
Also, Terry Matalas is an expert at finding sound in music. The music is so evocative of different movies and different shows. But did you hear the old bridge sounds from the original series? Did you hear the chiming of the bells like in Star Trek 2 and in Star Trek 6?
Yeah.
There are sounds in this episode 9 that just made me just overjoyed to know that the director is someone who is a Star Trek fan, and it comes through.
Yeah. He seems to be a fan of sci-fi and just all this stuff in general. He in Twitter the other day, he was talking about the Wilhelm scream.
Yes.
He was talking about how, he had never heard it so clearly or something like that, because I guess somebody found the original ADR session.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And yeah, what was the guy saying? He said, an alligator, you're being eaten by an alligator. Try it again.
No. Like you're
Sorry, I'll take Walter Koenig and Jack Quaid, Chekhov and Boimler screaming any day over the Wilhelm scream. I think they're better screamers.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah, I am on tenterhooks.
Okay.
To listen to watch episode 10. I hope it's an hour episode, because I don't want it to end, or an hour and a half. I don't know. Because
at least an hour. Yeah, sure.
It's been
so 40 let's do this again after we get our screener on Monday. We'll talk. We'll watch it a couple times, and we'll give out the spoilers as it was. And I'll make sure that when I put this out, spoiler alert everywhere.
Spoilers, yeah, there's spoilers galore in this, and I'm resisting telling anybody anything. I actually had a woman on Twitter write me in Spanish, begging me to tell her what happens in episode 9, and I told her, I'm sorry, there is no way, but
somebody actually asked me in a DM, I don't want you to tell me anything, just tell me if you've seen it. And I wrote back, said, no, I haven't. I'm actually very glad to wait with everyone else. And then like an hour later, you texted me, the screener. And I checked my email, and there it was. And I was like, oh God. I said, I actually thought about not watching it. And then what happens? I tell Terry, and Terry says, watch. So I did.
Yeah, all right. And he was right. I think I'm going to watch it as soon as I get off the Zoom with you. I'll watch it again. Awesome. I got like 3 more watches I can do before it's fired.
Well, have a great night. I've got to get to bed, because guess what? Tomorrow is college tour day with Leaf. So,
well, congratulations on that.
Yeah, it's gonna suck. I've been through 2 kids already with college tours, and you have the one, and he's already in college. So you're one and done, and I've got this one more kid that I have to take around and hear them talk about holistics and all this stuff.
Just think, you've put 3 more queer kids into the world.
That's it. It's my job. It's my contribution to the world. All right. Last time. This hand over here. Come on, do it. There you go. All right.
Okay, I can only do it this one. But,
you did it great.
Live long and prosper.
May you prosper and have long life. Isn't that the response? I think that
I don't remember what the, I don't know.
Eric said something like that. I don't know.
We're going to get killed for that. But anyway.
Let's just say, good talking to you. Good night.
Good night.